Well, good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here with you today presenting, and I'm going to share a difficult topic to talk about and share some information with you on some good ways that if you come across these situations that will help you talk about this topic as well. And so I'm Kristi and I have a lot of hats. I wear many hats. So just to share a little bit with you, I am on the Southern Illinois District Advocates for Life team, and I also do pro-life speaking. I'm a CEO at a local pregnancy resource center in Southern Illinois called the Beacon of Light Pregnancy Help Center as well. So again, many hats, but life ministry is my work and my passion. So I'm right where I'm called to be and where I feel I belong. So I want to share with you a little bit about my story, but I'm going to do that in a different way today. So first thing I want to ask you, sure.
It's on.
Is that better? Can you hear me okay? All right. So the first thing that I want to ask you, what are the exceptions, or who are the exceptions? I think we've all heard this topic. We've all, I don't know if all of you have met someone who's an exception. As of now, you have today. So that is my story. I was conceived in rape and incest, and I learned this as a young adult. And from there, I can tell you my life changed forever. After learning this information, it really set me on a different track than where I had been previously. So I want to ask another question. According to Gallup, how many Americans do you think believe abortion should be legal within the first trimester only in cases of rape and incest? Anyone have any ideas on that percentage? High? Yes, it is high. 80 something? 80, exactly. 80%. Now within the pro-life movement itself, so those who are pro-life or claim to be pro-life, what do you think the percentage is there for individuals who still will hold an exception for being, what's that?
It's still 80.
Close. Getting closer, 60. So that the information is 60%. So not only am I here to say my life is valuable to the general public, but for those standing shoulder to shoulder with me in the pro-life movement, also, my life has value. And a lot of people don't recognize that because of the way that I was conceived. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. So for me, 80% of Americans don't value my life, right? 60% within the pro-life movement. That's a tough pill to swallow, right? All I can say is, thank goodness, my worth is not determined by Americans or anyone per se. So let me explain that a little bit further. And we've heard this message. I've heard this message multiple times this morning already. And I was, I can't say surprised, but just very pleased to hear this message throughout the conference today, that we are all created in the image of God, each and every one of us. So here's where I know we just had lunch. So I want to do a little bit of interaction, but nobody needs to get out of their seat. But I just want you to turn to the person next to you and tell the person next to you, you are a child of God. And now turn to the person again and say, you were created in the image of God. Very good. You all are very active. That's wonderful. So again, each and every one of us, no matter how we were conceived, we are all created in the image of God, and we are all children of God. He determines my worth just as he does anyone else. And he has called us all his children. He doesn't select some and not others. We are all his children. I'm going to share with you Psalm 139, 13 through 14. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. So with that, God doesn't make mistakes. How I got here, how others have gotten here who are conceived in rape or incest, the act itself is evil. However, what the devil intended for ill, God took and used it for his glory. At the age of 16, my birth mother had me and placed me for adoption. Still a child herself, she faced an unimaginable home situation, and she knew that bringing me home to that situation was not a good idea. Just from 4 years old, she had experienced abuse from her own father. And she knew bringing me into that kind of a situation would not be safe for myself. So without even seeing me at the hospital, she had me and placed me for adoption. I was raised in a very loving Christian home with two wonderful parents. And I know that God had a hand in all of it. I cannot deny that. For my birth mother, so she was 16 at the time that she had me. The abuse for her went on for over 20 years. The same abuse resulted in 6 pregnancies. So I was the second pregnancy. The first, she was forced to miscarry the child through violence. Then she hid my pregnancy, placed me for adoption as soon as I was born. And then over the course of several years, she had an additional 4 pregnancies that she was forced to abort. And that pretty well set the stage for her path. I can't imagine being in her shoes. I can't imagine having to go through that and what she had to deal with. It was not until 13 years after my birth and adoption that she found the courage to stand up for herself. She prosecuted her father. She took him to court. And what do you think they found? Any thoughts? Some of you who know my story already know this answer, but what do you think they found when she took him to court? Where was the evidence? Gone. So there was no evidence to support her case. It was a he said, she said. He served a very minimal sentence of 18, give or take, months for more than 20 years of abuse because there was no evidence to convict him. Now for my parents, I was placed in a closed adoption and they had no idea any of this was going on until the prosecution. And at my adoption, they were accidentally given a paper with my birth family's names. And that's how they knew 13 years later when it was published in a local newspaper with the names of my birth mother and both of her parents. And that's how they knew my background. I can't imagine being in their shoes at that point in time, but I can say that it never made a difference in their love for me. It never made any difference to them at all. And I'm very grateful that God placed me in such a wonderful family. It wouldn't be until another 17 years that I would learn any of this. So, and I'm grateful for that. This is a difficult topic, and especially as a young teenager, who wants to have to deal with all of that weight that brings. So it was 17 years later that I learned all of this, and that's a whole nother story in and of itself. So I won't get much into that unless we have some time at the end, but I ended up leaving my 10-year career after finding this information. I was in banking for 10 years. I ended up leaving that career because I knew God was calling me in a different direction. And so I left, pretty well, just turned in my notice and said, I'm going back to school. And, felt very called to be doing that. And I had a lot of support from my family as well. I wanted to be in a position, and I felt very led to be in a position that I could further help women who, much like my birth mother, were facing a very difficult situation. And I knew that in banking, I wouldn't really have much of that opportunity. So I went back and got my degree as a social worker. I got my master's in social work. And that has led me to where I am now, the CEO of a pregnancy center in Southern Illinois, doing exactly what I wanted to do when I went back to school. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity as well. I've gotten very involved in life ministries over the course of the time. And then, of course, I had the position that I'm in now. I previously had other positions in the pro-life movement, and one of those was sidewalk counseling. And I saw on the schedule today, I'm anxious to go to that breakout as well about the sidewalk advocates. I had the opportunity to do that both at Fairview Heights, Illinois, which is a mega clinic there, and also before St. Louis stopped performing abortions in front of St. Louis. And that is just an amazing experience to know that you are right there as they're going in, and you have what may be their last opportunity to stop, that momentum that they're going into the abortion facility. So that was eye-opening and very rewarding. Very grateful for that opportunity as well. To all of these things, I say praise be to God that He brought me to where I am now, that He gave me a voice to speak. I'm one of 6 conceived in rape and incest, and I am the only survivor of those 6. So praise be to God that I have a voice, and that He has given me courage. If you knew me growing up, I never would have gotten in front of anyone to speak, never. So it's certainly His doing. He has a purpose for my life, and again, what the devil intended for evil, He is using for His glory. Exceptions do not ask to be born in this fashion. But I can tell you that I am personally grateful for my life. I also want to dispel a myth. The presence of a child conceived in rape and incest does not necessarily cause more trauma for the mother. My case is a prime example of this. I was very hesitant in reuniting with my birth family because I didn't want to bring more trauma. The articles that, of course, I went and found after learning that it was published in the paper, I did go get copies of those prior to seeking a reunion with my birth family, my birth mother. And it spelled it out very clearly what had happened. They didn't leave much detail out. And so it took me about a week. I really prayed and tried to discern where God was directing me to go. And a week later, I felt again very compelled to move forward. So I did. I don't think I would have come this far just to say, okay, my concern was for her. How is she? Is she okay? What has her life been like? And just to be a light for her. And so it was a week later, I sent an email. Let me back up a little bit. All I had was her name. So first and last name. And of course, the internet wasn't what it is today, but we did have a little bit of, I would call it social media, I suppose. And that's how I found her. Just by typing in a name. And can you imagine never understanding who you look like, where you come from, any of those questions. And then you're searching the internet and you find a picture and you stare at that picture, or you come across that and you realize you're staring at someone who looks just like you, or you look just like that person. There was no doubt in my mind who she was. I knew right then and there that was my birth mother. And that was just a revelation in my world, like, oh my goodness, this is real, this is happening. And so I had very little information to go on with just her name. The site that I found had a partial email. It wasn't even a full email address, and I just guessed at the rest of it. And by the grace of God, it was her. So didn't know what to expect in return, and I didn't share much information, but I just said, I think we have a connection. I would love to talk to you. And I was hoping that she would be receptive. Sure enough, she was. So I had the opportunity to speak with her a few days later. Ironically, our power went out for 2 days. And back then you didn't have all of the amenities that we have now. So we had a hard line for the internet, no other options. And so I had to wait for the power to come back on. That was probably the longest 2 days of my life. But after that, we did connect. And a week later, I found myself driving 2 states away to meet her and to meet some other family. I did not meet my birth father, but I did meet some other family members. I share my story because I want to help others. You know, this is a difficult subject. This is a difficult topic, and to learn something so heavy. I'm grateful that I had a firm faith foundation. And so I just want to be able to help others in that as well, in any way that I can. So how do we address these sensitive situations with women? So you've gotten a few things that have come around. So we'll look at one of those here in just a moment, the bigger sheet. So the first thing that we can do is recognize that they have been through, what they've been through is traumatic. We have to meet them where they are and establish trust. And this is especially important in my role at a pregnancy center, because we have women, we have no idea where they have been. We have no idea what they have been through. And to be able to meet them where they are, and when they present such a heavy thing like this and explain that they may have experienced something like this, we have to be prepared to help them in any way that we can. So meeting them where they are and establishing that trust is a good way to break that ice. Pray, listen, and use compassion. Next, we have to note that abortion does not take away the rape. So if a woman were to come to me and say, okay, I've been raped and I need an abortion, again, using prayer, listening, and compassion, one of the things I'm going to talk to her about is the experience she's been through is not going to be taken away by an abortion. It often adds more trauma, and that is statistically proven that it adds more trauma because you're then adding a second, incident to what she's already been through. We also have to realize, who does it protect? So especially in my situation, who did it protect? It didn't protect her. She was left with no family support and a father who served very little time in prison because there was no evidence. It protected him. And then where was he? Right back out. And of course, is he going to stop the abuse? Not necessarily. It protects the perpetrator. Let's look at the article, the one that has the blue at the top of it. And I want to turn to the second page of this. So how to have a productive conversation about abortion in cases of rape and incest. So it should be the second page, and there are eight numbers going down the page. These are some key ways that we can really evaluate. So I want to highlight these. And this article, again, is from the Center of Human Dignity and Family Research Council. So the first way is begin by unequivocally condemning the act of rape as a heinous assault on human dignity. So of course, this is where we're going to start. affirm that all responsibility for the rape rests solely on the rapist, and that the victim does not bear any blame for the crime that occurred. And that's something that we see frequently. A victim will assume that it's their fault. That is a common thing. So we want to reassure her that this is not her fault. When discussing cases of incest, equally assert that this is a crime against human dignity and a complete violation of the safety and respect of the woman ought to have been able to have a member. Let me read that again. When discussing cases of incest, equally assert that this is a crime against human dignity and a complete violation of the safety and respect that the woman ought to have been able to have with a member of her family. Dignity and respect, not abuse. And then pivot the conversation towards the unborn child. So that unborn child is innocent in all of this, right? And there are two victims, not just the mom, but also her unborn child, who is a potential victim to abortion as well. So we want to address both mom and child, not just one over the other. Highlight that the child is an innocent third party to the crime that occurred, and aborting the child punishes him or her for another person's wrongdoing. So we certainly don't want that child to pay for someone else's crime. If your conversation partner accuses you of lacking compassion for the mother, how often do we hear this? That is probably the number one thing that I've heard recently, is that it lacks compassion for the mother when we don't hold those exceptions. When we're 100% pro-life, we're not having compassion for the mom. So lacking compassion for the mother and only caring about the well-being of the baby. Respond with information about the additional trauma and abortion inflicts on women, both mentally and physically. Point your conversation partner to resources explaining post-abortion stress syndrome, and highlight the lived testimonies of women who have been haunted by their abortions. So we want to do that with grace, right? We don't want to just throw that at them. We want to do that with grace. So it's very important to use grace in these situations because they've been through so much already. Tell your conversation partner that abortion does not heal wounds inflicted by rape and incest. Rather, it adds further trauma from which the mother will still have to heal. So in my own birth mother's experience, this is true. Again, I was very hesitant at first with the information. Where do I go with this? What do I do with this? And I'm glad that I knew that going forward was the right thing to do, because she reported that my presence in her life was actually healing for her. It brought her healing to know that God did something so wonderful that I was spared and she was able to be a part of that, in spite of all that she had gone through. She didn't ask to be forced to do any of that, and she didn't necessarily want to do any of that, but it was forced upon her and she had no choice. So I'm grateful that she hid my pregnancy long enough that I'm here with you today. Number 6, your conversation partner might name any number of potential scenarios in which they think the abortion is especially justifiable. The scenario of a minor becoming pregnant from rape. We've heard this recently a lot as well. Respond that no matter the circumstances, it does not change the fact the unborn child is also an innocent human being and does not deserve to die. Also going back to the Bible verse that we talked about earlier. Psalm 139, 13 through 14. For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. Again, there's no exception in that Bible verse, right? Each and every one of us is created in the image of God. If a mother does choose to parent her child, Pregnancy resource centers around the nation stand ready to assist with free material resources, counseling, and support. And I can't tell you how much this is important. For women that I've just in the short time I've been where I am, to see them come in and say, oh my goodness, I had no idea that this support was available to me. We are there, we are ready. And the pregnancy centers in the United States outnumber the abortion facilities. So we should be seeing more and more clients coming in. That is my prayer, that is my hope, that more women will turn to pregnancy centers before they will turn to abortion. Point your conversation partner to the options and resources that are available to victims of rape and incest who choose life for their babies. There are groups available if they want to do an online group. I'm a part of at least two. There are different groups that are available for additional support and resources. Women who carry their babies to term can always place them for adoption if they decide not to parent the child themselves. So let's talk about adoption for just a minute. You already know that I was adopted. What I haven't shared is both of my children are also adopted. I have a 7-year-old and I have an almost 19-year-old, which is very scary. But yes, both of my children are adopted as well. My husband is also adopted. So adoption is another thing that I'm very passionate about, very close to my heart. And it gives women another option without having to take the life of their child. And I'm very blessed to have been raised in such a loving and Christian home. And I know that there are many, many other loving and Christian homes out there that would be willing to adopt. The final bullets are number 8, explain the abortion exceptions. Explain that the abortion exception send the message to people conceived by rape or incest that their lives are less valuable than those who are not conceived in difficult circumstances. So we talked a little bit about this a few minutes ago with the 80% and 60%. When I first learned those numbers, that 60% of pro-lifers will hold an exception, I have a big job to do. Not only do I have to proclaim to everybody who is not on the same page as myself, but I also have to proclaim to those standing next to me. When I go to the March for Life, whatever city it is, that's something that's always in the back of my mind. You know, these friends here next to me, the people next to me walking, do they hold exceptions? So I have a big job to do. And I know that there are others proclaiming the same message that I am, who are also conceived in rape or incest. We all have a big job to do because our lives are just as valuable. So the article goes on to share, my story is in the back of this article. There's also another testimony here that you can read as well. So you're welcome to keep those. There was an additional resource that was handed out that I only recently came across and didn't know this existed until I went to another pro-life event last weekend up near Chicago. And abortion for victims of rape and incest. So this is something that's put out by Pro-Life Action League. And it gives you some more information other than the 8 bullet points that we've already gone through. Abortion for victims of rape and incest, they deserve better. What is reported, all of these things. So you're welcome to hang on to those as well. So why is it important to speak up about the exceptions when they only account for approximately 1% of all abortions? Was anyone aware of that the exceptions are only 1%? But why is it important to speak up for that 1%? Anyone have any thoughts? Life, exactly. So in some circumstances, and in my birth mother's circumstance, her own father abused her for over 20 years. Abortion didn't give her freedom. It didn't It didn't give her the freedom that many in favor of abortion claim that it would give her. It stole her childhood, it destroyed her children, and it allowed her to be a victim over and over again. She deserved better. My siblings deserve better. Women deserve better than that. We have to take a stand for all life. That's important, not just some lives. As we talked about earlier and throughout the conference, we are all conceived. We are all created in the image of God, each and every one of us. So we have to take a stand for all life. This we know is critical, but we must do it with God's love, not passing judgment, not condemning, whether a woman becomes pregnant by means of rape or incest or any other means. One of the things that I have observed in my position as the CEO is the lack of support reported by so many women. It's disheartening when women come in and say they have no family to support them, no matter what their situation is. That they don't have the support of the father, or they don't have the support of their family. It's heartbreaking. And so that's where we try and stand in that gap, and we try and step up and let them know they have support with us, with other pregnancy care centers. They are choosing abortion because of this. And it is here that our pregnancy centers play a critical role in saving the lives, not just the child. So now that Roe has been overturned, what does this mean? Incrementalism is often seen as a viable way to pass abortion laws, or laws restricting abortion. What is not often seen is that it still leaves a loophole for abortion on demand. So I want to share with you how it leaves that loophole. When a woman goes into an abortion facility, what does she need to prove that she is a victim of rape or incest? Any ideas? Nothing. It's just a check mark on a box on the intake form. There's no police report. There's no rape kit. There's no proof that she was raped. That leaves not just a loophole, but a wide open door. So where does that get us if we have legislation with exceptions? It doesn't get us very far, right? It doesn't get us very far at all. The state of Illinois, I'm from Illinois, so the state of Illinois is seeing a tremendous increase in the number of abortions. As you know, the laws in Illinois have expanded in cases of, or in abortion services, and they continue to expand. If we look at this through the eyes of exceptions, that means that there are likely more abortions due to rape and incest as well that are coming through the doors of abortion facilities. More victims are not getting the help that they need. Babies are still dying, mothers are still suffering, and abusers are still abusing. Just this past November, I could not watch local television without seeing politicians criticize opponents because they lack so much compassion with holding a platform of 100% pro-life. That was extremely, from my perspective, extremely disheartening because they don't value my life. And here they're proclaiming it on the television in every living room across how far. This is the ideology of misplaced compassion. There's not just one victim to consider, but two. There are two victims, both the mom and the child. So I intended to bring pennies with me today, but we can all visualize pennies, right? So running a little behind this morning, so I didn't have time. We can all visualize pennies. I want you to visualize pennies that are bright and shiny, other pennies that are very dull. What's the difference in those pennies? The color. Appearance. What's the difference in value? There is none. Just like there is no difference in value in any human being. Again, we are all created in the image of God. We must remain diligent in proclaiming all life to be precious, created in the image of God, and holding immeasurable value. I want to check time. We have 10 minutes. So I want to open it up now for questions. We have a few minutes left. Yeah. Yes.
You had indicated that your mother had 6 abortions.
Four.
6
total pregnancies from the abuse.
Okay, so she would go into an abortion clinic and check the box, rape of incest. Didn't even have to do that.
No, at that time, she was forced to go to the abortion facility. No one asked her questions. There weren't sidewalk counselors. There wasn't anyone out there to offer her assistance, and they weren't asking questions when she went in.
In the states that do have the check off boxes, do they then inquire or investigate the circumstances that led to that? Or they just-
Typically, no. Yeah, typically, no, it's not investigated. It's a checkbox. If you are carrying a child and you say it's from rape or incest, you check the box.
Yeah.
That's the end of it. And with laws like states that have laws restricting abortion, except for those cases, that leaves that window wide open for anyone to walk in and say, I'm carrying a child that was conceived in rape or incest. And so then they don't have to prove it. They don't have to get a police report. They don't have to file charges against the father. If they know who it is or don't know who it is, they don't have to do any of those things. Any other questions?
Do you know exactly what excludes them from being mandatory reporters, especially in incest, which is abuse?
That's a good question. I don't know that. I know that many professions are mandated reporters, and why that isn't required there, I don't know. That's a very good question. That's a very good question. And if they are required, it's not being utilized. Yes.
Did your mom want to have other children?
Yes.
And so she was in counseling, or she a believer in Christ, or how has she gone on with her life?
Yes, yes, and yes. Yeah. So I am very pleased to say that she has taken steps to heal, and she has gotten significant help in doing that. And I've walked alongside her during some of that healing as well. And that's a blessing for her, but also for me to be in that position, to be here, reassuring her that she can do this, and what she went through was not her fault. So it is a wonderful thing that God has provided for both of us.
An online question.
Yes.
The pro-abortion people are good at denying post-abortion trauma. Do you have any good, reliable, and current resources for statistics?
Not here, but yes, there are reliable. So if it's possible to get contact information, I could certainly send some information for that. If they want to submit any kind of email address, then I would be glad to follow up.
Okay.
Certainly. Yes.
Looking in particular at point number 3 on having a productive conversation, what is the role of grace in your counseling? It is to hold the child in grace and not punish the child for the sins of another is impossible if you are not one who has received grace. How do you work with someone who is encountering this to go to where grace is given?
That is a great question. So we are a faith-based organization. We are very upfront about that. And we will encourage them to learn more about Christ. We are going to offer a Bible study. We will openly talk with them if they are receptive, and we introduce them to God's grace, and that no matter what they've gone through, He is there to love them no matter what. So the program that we use incorporates all of those things. It's called the Love Approach. And so we will utilize those tools to walk a woman through that situation gracefully. Yes.
Just how long is your relationship with unplanned pregnant person? On average?
It depends on when they come to us. So if it's very early on in their pregnancy, we will walk through the entire pregnancy with them, and years down the road, just depends on where they are. So each person has a different story, and each person comes to us at a different point. And if somebody comes to our organization after they've had the baby, we welcome them with open arms. So a lot of our things, we have a boutique at the center. So a lot of pregnancy resource centers will have supplies readily available for women. Even dads, we have dads who come in as well. So that's a blessing that we don't put a time limit on them. And if they need other resources, we will certainly guide and direct them in that. We welcome them to come back and participate in things that we have going on. And we will just continue to walk with them as long as they need. Yes.
Did you say you, for a sidewalk activity?
Yes. So I did sidewalk counseling for a little while.
So did you meet anybody that had the same, situation as your mother?
One. And then, yeah. And it's very humbling to be in that position, you know, to know that God put you there for a reason, and to be able to utilize what I had experienced and what my birth mother had experienced to help another person. Very humbling. A few more minutes. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm thinking about the father or the perpetrator of the incest and rape, and, you know, where does God, I mean, what have you seen in those cases about God's forgiveness for that person? And from, for example, you or anyone else in that situation?
It's a difficult place, but God does allow us to forgive. And that's the worst of the worst. He allows us to forgive. We are forgiven. And so that is, again, his grace that we are able to do that. And it is hard. It is hard in many situations. But it's possible. Any other questions? Yeah.
Did your mother's brother live with you, or live with your mother?
Yes. Yes. And that was a very difficult situation at the time. So I briefly mentioned that my birth mother's family turned from her. So when she prosecuted my birth father, her family did not believe her. And most of her family did not believe her until I walked into the picture 13 years later, or 17 years later. So that was kind of more healing for my birth mother, because her family then knew what had really happened. Any other questions?
We have 1 minute.
1 minute, okay. Last call for questions. Well, thank you all so much.